All right. Kalispera. Good evening from Greece, from Hellenic Mediterranean University, from the Athena European University. This is the last lecture before the summer vacation for our students, and I hope for all of you, not for me. You know, the vacations for me starts in August, but I would like to welcome you to this last lecture. It's a great honor to have with us Joseph Georgos, an excellent colleague in the Athena European University, the head of our research journal in this European alliance. I'm going to give a short description of some items of the resume of Professor Georgos. His professional career involves three activities: the academic, the government service, and chairing a lot of national research funding agencies in collaboration with the European respective funding agencies. So Joseph has received his PhD in 1992 from the University of Maribor in Slovenia in the computer science and informatics. His research during his PhD was focused on extensions of software process modeling, evaluation, and validation. And based on his research interest, he has participated in a number of high competitive funding projects through FP7, and also he was a member of the external monitoring group of the FP6 ICT thematic priority first call proposal evaluation launched by the European Commission. Then his CV and his qualification involves also a lot of governance services. So in 2 terms, Joseph Georgos was a state secretary, deputy minister of the government of Republic of Slovenia. Between 2001 and 2004, he was the state secretary at the Ministry of Information Society. Then from 2008 till 2011, he has served as the state secretary at the Ministry of Higher Education, Science and Technology, including the portfolio of Information Society. For me, you are the third general secretary at the Ministry of Higher Education, Science and Technology that I met. So thank you very much, Joseph, for this. And then I'm moving a little bit on his duties in National Research Funding Agency. So in 2014, the government of Republic of Slovenia appointed Joseph as a director of the Slovenian Research Agency. So all of them, and also to highlight that he was as a part of the Slovenian Research Agency, he has worked very closely with the European Commission about the priority. Nowadays is a high priority of the European Commission regarding the open access to scientific publications and data. And all these qualifications and competencies, I think that justifies today's talk from Joseph, his contribution entitled Challenges of Research Funding, Reading Data on Research Funding and the Changing Role of Bibliometrics. Also, Joseph has shared with me a very nice article from Nature, the Leiden Manifesto for Research Metrics, and this one will be available through the Moodle platform for our students. And if Joseph agrees, I can share it also through the chat channel. So the floor is yours, Joseph. Thank you very much. Ευχαριστώ πολύ in Greek for your contribution, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kostas, for this nice introduction. And first of all, thank you for the invitation. So ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I will present today an approach to the challenges which we are, as researchers, not often aware of. Namely, in the background of our work, there is always research funding. In some way, we often treat it when we are in the heat of research and new discoveries. We don't think about how it is funded. When we are young researchers later, we spend more and more time for this. So, but nevertheless, it is very important that the state provides some funds for research, significant funds, I would say, because it is a prosperous approach. And I would like to go to the introduction now. I'd like to share with you the content of my presentation. And it is first, I will speak about research funding to explain the vocabulary and various approaches. And in this part, I would like to mention also the countries of Athena partners. Maybe some of these data are not accurate anymore. So I would like to ask you to contribute with your discussion and to explain if something was changed since 2015, when this data was collected by Joint Research Center of the European Union. Then I will follow with importance or presenting the role of research funding organizations. And the second part is dedicated to the changing notion of bibliometrics. Here we had the lecture a week ago given by our colleague Dunja Legat. She's the director of University Library at the University of Maribor. And she was already talking about the open access. I will try to complement her excellent explanations on this content, and we already started a week ago a discussion, and I hope that we can continue now. So I will finish, of course, with some conclusions and, may I say, foresights. But let me tell at the beginning that my lecture is in some way informative. It means that it opens some questions, it gives you literature, it gives you maybe some ideas, and that's the reason that I'm giving you three or four resources, kind of a literature, because these are strategies, these are documents, position documents, and so on. These are not scientific papers, but they speak about the science and how the evaluation of science and funding of science is organized. The first on the left is the GRC Science for Policy report, which I'm basing on my lecture. It's about the performance-based funding. That's the new, not just buzzword, but a new intention how the research should be funded in the infrastructural way by the state. The second, I will touch just in the visions or in conclusions, is the UNESCO Science Report, which I find quite important. First of all, because it is related to the global development goals. And here are the recommendations of research assessment processes. We often approach the research assessment processes a bit intuitively. So there is a lot of literature which can help us when we are doing some these endeavors. And nevertheless, down there is also the compendium of bibliometric science indications, OECD. As you will see, I'm not very in favor of bibliometrics, but of course, I would like to be balanced. And this OECD report gives you a very detailed impression about what are the bibliometrics, the impact factors, and so on. And it gives the comparison, yes, it compares the OECD countries. So let's start now with research funding. I would like to clarify first the vocabulary and show you the different approaches. So these magic words, the buzzwords, almost the performance-based research funding, it speaks about how the institutional funding is allocated to the researchers or to research organizations, of course, because we have research funding organizations and we have in every state more research performing organizations. These are institutes, universities, and so on. So let's read this definition: allocation of institutional funding based on ex post assessment of university research performance. It means that when some institutional funding is enabled to an entity, let's say institute at the university, then there is no pre-ante, ex-ante evaluation, but ex post, so at the end. So it speaks about the prolongation, about new contract for these researchers. So one of the main priorities of the European research area already for 20 years, when the ERA was conceived, is to increase the effectiveness of public research systems through the introduction of funding mechanisms linked to performance. So the performance needs to be measured, but the idea is that we do not bother all the time the researchers with some checking, with reporting, when we are speaking about so-called stable funding, non-competitive. And the performance-based research funding differs from other models. Which are the other models? The other models are non-competitive institutional block funding. So institutions are simply given by governmental funds, so that they are given the governmental funds. And on very different basis. It depends on different states. There is some contracts, there is tradition, there is also lobbying maybe. And so of course we need some more clear approach to this, and this is the performance based. Or of course, on the other side, there is competitive project funding, but it does not give to the institutional stability. Of course, competitive project funding needs to be performed, and it must be, the funds must be allocated through competitiveness, but not in 100%, because the institutions need some stability. So from the same GRC report, we can see the different approaches. Data are from 2015. You can see that some of the countries, European member countries, don't have any metrics, or they have maybe education metrics. Just it means that the funding of these universities is based on educational program that they are performing. And that there are, for example, Slovenia is in the second part where there were centers of excellence, but in Slovenia, a new law was adopted 2 years ago, and so it goes toward research performance-based funding now. But what's interesting in this table is that there are 3 ways of research performance-based funding, but they do not exclude each other, as we will see later. So the formula-based, a non-bibliometric formula. It can be a very interesting formula on number of researchers, number of young researchers, success of these researchers, and so on. Then bibliometric formula-based is the next possibility, and the peer review assessment-based. So you can see that there are very different approaches in Europe, and there is actually no intention to harmonize fully these approaches, but the intention is to have the performance-based approach. This graph is very interesting, and I tried to mark the Athena countries, the Athena partner countries on the top. This A means that there are the states and the countries from which our Athena partners are coming. And with the white one are the old members of Athena, and with yellow are marked the new members. So what shows this graph? This graph shows that in some of the countries, there is a block funding, actually. So the blue shows, the blue color shows, the blue bar, that there is quite stability in the funding, and that researchers are not forced to fight for funds. Of course, I don't want to idealize, because maybe some of our colleagues will say that yes, but this is not enough for all salary. So we can go here in very detailed discussions, but what I just like to show is that there is a part of institutional funding which gives some stability, and there is a part of project funding, the green one, and the red dot shows the look back for 10 years. How was the position of institutional funding in 2007? And you can see that some of the countries raised or some dropped. Because our host is from Greece, I found this citation from the report that organizational funding in Greece is exclusively block funding and not based on any organizational assessment. That there has been a hefty opposition to evaluations and accreditation, discouraging efforts to link assessment to organizational funding. So I would be really interested later, maybe Kostas, or for your response or the response of your colleagues who are attending this lecture. And here is the picture that explains how it looks when the institutional funding is performed. When the performance-based institutional funding is performed. You can see if you follow the green arrows, then you can see the right way, let's say. This is a performance-based research funding. It means that when institutional funds are allocated, then an ex post research assessment is done for those who are already performing the research. Then the funding allocation is based on assessment. And this assessment, as I already mentioned, can be threefold. You can use all three of them, often the combination is used, or you just use one. But if you're using just one, it is not the best solution. Let's just repeat that. We have the formula based on quantitative metrics. As I mentioned earlier, for example, if you achieve the key performance indicators, and then it can be a matrix informed by peer review. It means that there is some evaluation group that visits the institution, that goes through the materials, reads the papers, reads the progress, and so on. And of course, the pure peer review. So more often, of course, all this is combined. And now I go to the next chapter. It's about the research funding organizations. Why they are important? Because as you noticed, I am talking now not from the level of individual institution, the university, but maybe from the level of organized approach of allocating the budget for science. We all dream about 3%, or just Finland reached or is above this in Europe, and Austrians are quite high. So, but when we speak about these funds, there are research funding organizations, and in most of the states there is one centralized research funding organization. There is an exception. There are some exceptions. For example, in Poland, there are 2 of them, and also in Hungary, I think so. The situation now changed. And Science Europe is the organization which joins all these research funding organizations, and it is very important that they cooperate because they need to learn from each other. And let me just go. I had an honor to be a board member of Science Europe for 3 years. So of course I find it as an important organization. So what we did, what was the role of Science Europe with all these members? Active advocacy. So it is important that Science Europe and with this the research funders are recognized and respected voice in the European research area, and alongside with national governments. So not just the so-called lobbying role in the European Commission, but also recognition by the government. And there is some mutuality. If you are recognized in EU, of course, then your local government will pay more attention to your actions because you have some influence also on the other part of this cable, let's say. So, and the collaboration is the next to promote exchanges and cooperation between member organizations in terms of policy and activities. For example, there was, and when I was director of Slovenian Research Agency, very important cooperation with other research funders. And we had more of this bilateral agreement, even multilateral agreement, but it is not just a protocol, or it is not a protocol. It is a cooperation, which means recognition of evaluation results in one state, in another. Research funding organizations are often criticized because of, let's say, alleged incompetence of evaluators or lack of funds and so on. And that's the reason that you are bringing with cooperation between research funding organizations, reliability in the system. A very big step for Slovenian Research Agency was when we signed the agreement with SNSF, the Swiss National Research Funding Organization, which meant mutual recognition of the evaluations. Okay, so I already told about this 2.2. It's national research funding organizations. What is their profile? How we know that we have a national research funding organization? It has a substantial and significant impact on the national research system and the budget. It is funded primarily through national public funding and have substantial operating independence from their national government. So it is very important. Kostas read read my CV. He gave you some details, and I need to stress that even I was twice Deputy Minister, State Secretary. At the time when I was the director of Slovenian Research Agency, I was not related in any way with politics. So I stepped out and I finished this part of my career more than 10 years ago. So that this independence is very important. Of course, the director and the public servants in research funding organization, they are all the time in contact with politicians, with the ministries, but they have their independence given also by law. So here I made a table, and I don't know if it is accurate enough, but I just checked the pages of Science Europe, and I was interested in Athena partner countries. Do they have a research funding organization? And I found two holes, let's say. So two countries where there is no independent research funding organization. It means, of course, that the funding is, I think, done through the appropriate minister. So in France, our colleagues from Orléans, they're fighting for their national funds from ANR, from French National Research Agency, Germans from DFG, colleagues in Ziegen, in Lithuania from LTM, Portugal FCT, and Slovenia IRS. And in Poland, you can see that there are two research funding organizations, FNL and NCN. And in Spain, there is EI, the Spanish State Research Agency. Yes.
In Greece, not recently, before I will say 4 years, we have generated, a research funding organization, which is the ELIDEC, mainly funding researchers like in a postdoc. We name it the Greek ERC. Probably I can share with you information later on in order to update, this transparency. But yes, mainly the funding comes from the ministry. But before 4 years, we tried to create and generate a specific funding agency for new researchers or researchers in general to support their research, which is called ELIDEC in Greek. I will find the information for you.
Thank you. And I think it would be very good if you can contact them, and that they should join Science Europe. Yeah. Then they are on this list, and there is a lot of opportunity to cooperate. So let me thank you for this intervention. Let me continue. my third part or second part of this lecture is this intriguing one, a bit more, the changing role, the changing notion, I've wrote many, even of bibliometrics. In last years, more than last years, and I think it is more than 10 years that some different initiatives started. And for example, the San Francisco Declaration. Namely, what happened? Also in Slovenia, I can speak from our experience, there was an excellent computer system set up, which measured almost everything from the researchers. And that's not a problem at all, impact factors and so on, and number of papers, and the weighting of them. And, but at the end, the problem appears when this is the only criteria for choosing the projects or making any payment. So there's nothing wrong with the metrics if you know what you are measuring and you use it, as Leiden Manifesto says. You can see it here and down here. Use quantitative evaluation to support and not to substitute expert evaluation. And all the effort of Dora and Leiden is that we should not rely just on quantitative measures. And here we come to the part of the open access. The open access changed the approach a little bit. Namely, we heard all the important details from Dunja a week ago. Of course, it's changed the landscape. At once, there is a possibility to publish your work earlier, to retain your rights, to achieve even higher citation rates. And at the end, but at the end, you of course, if your university is requiring from you your success expressed in impact factor, then someone would say that it doesn't help. And so that open access is a black hole in some way. But it isn't so. Namely, when we started, our agency was one of the first initiators, signatories of open access approach. We were 7 or 9, and it wasn't expected to be such a success until we didn't get on board some very important partners, which are actually private institutions. And this is Wellcome Fund from the United Kingdom and the Gates Foundation. They have, of course, plenty of calls, and they distribute a lot of money to the research community. So that at this slide, I just like to say, of course, there are clash of civilizations. I tried to bring in some humor in quantitative versus qualitative evaluation, but down there by Leiden Manifesto, there is already an answer. And here I would like to reflect back to the what I said by performance-based funding, that there are needed different approaches when we evaluate if some institute will get next year 10 or 12 million of euros, for example, for their work. And so I always like to be very fair, and there is also a different approach shown, the Compendium on Bibliometric Science Indicators. It was published by OECD and CSIC from Spain and Simago Lab. They published a very good comparison of bibliometric science indicators. So if you want to read about them, of course, here we will find the best compendium, because it is hard to do this work by yourself. But this quotation from executive summary is important. This publication is informed by, but does not attempt to discuss the use that is made of bibliometric information at the level of individuals and institutions for performance management, grant allocation, personal promotion, and other decisions. At the end, also this report, which is just about bibliometrics, say that pay attention to different approaches too. Don't be misled by the numbers. And of course, also Science Europe reports on this changing notion of bibliometrics. And I would like to invite you to read the position statement and recommendations on research assessment processes. Science Europe made a very good effort on this, how the evaluation process should be made. So approaches used to assess and select proposals and researchers. There are recommendations on this. Then very important is the transparency of research assessment processes. And of course, discrimination, bias, and unfair treatment must be avoided in research assessment practices. Of course, these are very general categories, but when you go into details, when you perform as an agency, research funding agency, the evaluation processes, you are faced with very strong questions that need to be answered, and the devil is always in the details. Here is a case study. In Slovenia, we are very proud of our current research information system, and most of countries, of Athena partner countries, have their own CRIS systems, current research information system. Even these systems are now maybe more or less replaced in some way, or complemented would be better, with ORCID, for example, and with other systems which are not so closed anymore. But my opinion is, not just my personal opinion, but also as an expert in this field, that the system, the current research information system, which is called SICRIS, Slovenian Current Research Information System, was very important in one part of Slovenian history when the processes were formalized. It was on the break of the millennia. So that everything was too quantified at one moment. Okay. Good. Our colleague Marco Holbel, those who were at the Tina meetings, you know Marco very well, and he is one of the very propulsive young researchers now. And of course, it is with his permission I am showing his profile on this secret system. Of course, the first part of this system is descriptional, which field he's working, and so on. But you can see also here on the bottom that there is a bibliography, and you can print out, of course, the bibliography, which can be a representative one. It means just the best 10 papers, so on which criteria is of course the next question, and the personal bibliography, and so on. But I would like to show this. So this is this quantitative part. Now the system is modified so that this is not the first page, or it's on the bottom of the page when you open the CRIS system, the quantitative elements. And you can see on the top, maybe you will recognize just one or two of them. The Hirsch index, and of course the citation in 10 best journals. All others, this A-2 dashes, 1 dash, and A1/2, and so on. These are very Slovenian-oriented, national-oriented indicators, which were brought into the system in early, around 2000 and some years. Of course, they are in some way discussable, so we can discuss them, and the expert community is discussing quite a lot of them. But what happened, even if you want to abandon some of these indicators, because some of, for example, these points 446.72 are not relevant, but they are still used. They are still used not just by the National Research Agency, but which is more important and more dangerous, by universities for evaluations for habilitations. So the National Research Agency is using them, or some of them, for drawing the threshold who is eligible to run for funds of the agency, who can be the leader of the project, for example. But the universities, even some of them, for example, University of Maribor, signed the DORA declaration. They are still using these indicators. What I'd like to show is also that here you can see on this picture the difference. Web of Science, actually the impact factor is the indicator of Web of Science, of consortia of Web of Science. And there is the elsewhere description indicator, the Scopus, and they differ, of course. There is no comparability. This can be a long discussion, but on the other side, it is quite illustrative when you want to show your profile, and this graph about the citations is very important. Of course, we discussed with Kostas and some others in the previous lecture the important, which bibliometric is then important. Of course, the citations are still important. Nobody wants to take them away, but you cannot make the judgment just on them. And I'm now finishing my presentation. This is almost the last slide. Very important thing happened with Horizon Europe program and with ERC. We are all trying to, the research funding organizations, try to mirror the principles, the processes of ERC, European Research Council, sorry. The European Research Council, which of course is one of the most important funder, I think, the institutional funder in Europe. And what happened with them? What did they decide? There is no impact factor. So that when you, at the right side of the screen, I'll try to use, but I don't want to endanger my sharing, this laser pointer. So here you can see the early achievement track record, how you describe when you run for the funds. So of course you can use all the descriptions, research field, highlights, some of your research and so on. You can use field relevant bibliometric indicators, but accept the journal impact factor. So that now it will be interesting to see when it will be transposed, this approach, also to the national levels. And here is a quotation from Open Science in Practice for new ERC grantee recipients already from 2021. It is also useful to bear in mind that the ERC research proposal and evaluation system has banned, very strong word, or banned references to a publication's journal impact factor in the researcher's track record. So make some serious effort, describe what you're doing in different ways, not with these numbers. And it is also quite a tough job for evaluators, because then they cannot rely, and they are not allowed. They sign the statement that they will not check the impact factor, and that they will not be misled by the impact factor, even if they are going to check it. I don't know now the exact formulation, but it is something like this. And so it's almost 45 minutes already. Here with conclusions and foresight. At the beginning, I would like to stress the importance of open access. I'm the open access evangelist, so it's clear for you now already. So the open access to scientific publications, not just publications, but also to research data, introduced an urge to rethink the funding and evaluation mechanisms in the research policy and production itself, research production itself. Of course, all the journals, the big publishers, they adopted their business models in 2 years, so that a lot of their journals, which are quite expensive, are now in open access. Of course, it can be a golden approach, it can be a green approach, and Dunya explained that there is a bulk of open access fees, ACPs, given to the state by these publishers, because the state buys the bulk of journals, and then the researchers can compete on first come, first served basis for these licenses to publish in open access. So my second conclusion, foresight, is that the quantitative research evaluation and the research metrics are challenged in their objectiveness and appropriacy, and confronted with the need for a more qualitative approach, like we can read in Leiden Manifesto, and this is the communication from Nature, the comment chapter, which was shared with you by Kostas. And this is here we have these 10 principles of Leiden Manifesto, which are slowly adopted, and I think it will take additional 5 to 10 years that they will be maybe revised, but almost fully adopted. And the foresight, the predictable and less predictable challenges are influencing the research policies worldwide. And what do I think with this? Predictable are, for example, the United Nations and UNESCO's Sustainable Development Goals. They were accepted, they were adopted by acclamation of all the member countries. And the less predictable, like COVID, shows to us when changes were introduced at the moment. So societal impact of research and the need for immediate response are expected to increasingly influence the funding and evaluation criteria. So it doesn't mean that when some problem appears, we need to run for and to sacrifice some principles of research work. No, the principles of research work are the basis for all our efforts, even when we are facing new challenges in our career. So with this slide, I would like to end my presentation. I'm ready for discussion, to answer your questions, or just listen to your experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for this very accurate and very precise presentation. Please stop sharing the screen and give the floor to the audience for some questions. I have a question. I think that you have changed my mind. I totally agree with you, first of all, because I know from also, you know, the real world operates as you are suggesting us to operate in academia regarding the evaluation. So in the real world, probably you can be invited for an interview because of your CV, but you are going to be hired after a discussion, after an interview you will have with the people. So they try to match the quantity, which is depicted from your CV, to the quality criteria that they are getting through the discussion that happens. And this is very correct. Now in academia, we are more biased regarding H index and impact factor than what actually many of us we have realized. Personally, myself, I have realized people with a very high H index factors, they don't correspond to the knowledge or to, let's say, to expertise that you are expecting, you know, based on this. I don't know how this has been made, but somehow, you know, the system is leaking, you know, somewhere. But I have a question to you. Like, we have seen that even though these numbers, they vary from field to field. For example, if you go to medicine, you know, the citations and the H index, or in chemistry, is very high. If you go to the teaching science, that also there are researchers over there, the H index and the citation is very low. Of course, you will tell me that the communities independently, they have a reference point and they have they can compare what is happening. But what is happening when we have a guy, a researcher from teaching science in the same university with a chemist researcher who is the credited scientist based to the numbers? You will tell me, of course, then we go to the quality and then we speak with them. But I mean, how can we address also this challenge, like to make a number that reflects the whole story, independent of the audience, independent of the field? What is the calibration factor that we should use?
Yeah, yes, the calibration factor is interview and group decision of a board, I think so. So that would be the quick answer, but I'd like to start with the sixth item of the Leiden Manifesto, which speaks about this. Account for variation by field in publications and citation practices. And here is also the case of citation rates vary by field. Top-ranked journals in mathematics have impact factors around 3. Top-ranked journals in cell biology have impact factors about 30. So that in specific fields, of course, we can talk about some comparability. But we opened a very interesting question because there is a lot of multidisciplinarity in last year, and I think that we will even have more and more multidisciplinarity. We noticed in Slovenia also some speculations when someone is declared expert in one field and then he's publishing in journals in other field, when he is more successful than like he would be, for example, if he is from physics and he's publishing in economy, and he is impressing those editors with his approach or her approach. So that that's the reason why you need a board and why you need an interview, why you need an evaluation. If he's appropriate for teaching, it's fine. If he is a good educator and he has expertise also in the field which is not his generic fields. We know that after 20 years or even more, you change your expertise based on the success or experience from past. Even you are not getting formal recognition of your skills. You can get it, of course, through publishing the papers in other fields. So that my answer would be, yes, it's a complex process, and all the processes of evaluation, if this is a habilitation of or allocation of funds for a project, will take longer or needs to take longer. There needs to be more dialogue. And there are good practices which are used differently, but then they try to introduce it also at the agency, because it is a very good practice from the European Union when individual reports are made by the evaluators. Then, of course, there is a consensus meeting. When you not just 3 + 5 + 4 is, so that not just calculating the average of some assessments, but these evaluators need to speak to each other face to face. It is time consuming, yes, and so it means that the evaluation we can spend for evaluation up to 15%. That's quite normal of funds available for group of projects.
And thank you. And I have another question. Like, the question that I have is the following. I mean, let's say that we change the mind of the people, the governance of the universities, that I'm going to ask you, this is my third question, like, what are the main challenges to convince the universities from the European Commission side in order to change the way of their thinking? What are the main challenges? Why you cannot convince them, in a day, to say to them, stop this, we are going to use another methodology? And this is like now my question. I mean, let's suspect that I'm evaluating myself as a teacher or as a researcher. So I suspect that, some people from a committee that consists from a finite number of people, they will come to me and they were going to ask me questions, but probably I'm lucky, these are my friends, and, I can convince them that I'm excellent. So I will get, an evaluation that this guy is an excellent, qualitative. How credible is this? Of course, you will tell me we need both things, but at the end of the day, how are we going to convince someone that, this is a good researcher? In one thing, it's like credibility. Like it's like a limited number of people that they are going to evaluate.
Yes, of course, first of all, the track of his record. So that's very important. So if he has different projects or just projects from one source, or did he get or he or she recognition from different authorities? And what you mentioned is about friends. Of course, we know each other very. These circles are worldwide, even narrow, and it's about the ethics then, and
Yes.
about the conflict of interest. So it needs to be treated very clearly. About the European Commission and they influencing the universities now, it's impossible. It's impossible even that the government, that it would not be correct at all if the government would influence the universities, their autonomy. So they can just, in legislation, they can state the general items about how universities organize, but at the scientific level and teaching level, it needs to have its autonomy, and there need to be set up the institutions which are independent from the government that can check and make reviews. But inside, for example, for habilitations, I really don't have an answer to this. I think that in our case, maybe it is changed now, but the quantitative approach is so strong. Of course, it is as a threshold that the verbal assessment of the members of the rapporteurs is even not so important. It is, if the threshold, you are over the threshold, then there is no how to say, the importance is taken away in some way with quantitative approach. That's what can happen.
And I have a final question. I mean, since the others, they are shy. How are we going to compare the different journals? As the humans, as the scientists, we don't like to say everyone is good or everyone is bad. I mean, we should have a classification, a ranking, regarding the quality of the journals. How the quality of the journals is going to be evaluated if we forget about the impact, the impact factor?
So the Scopus and Web of Science will still use the impact indicators, of course, and this can be one of the evaluation decision criteria for researchers. You cannot change the old habit too soon, but if it is not needed, then you can lose their importance. But I think that the best way to choose the journal where to publish is where your peers are publishing, where important people, you trust them, you are using them as a citation, you discuss with them your research findings. Where they publish, there should also you publish. I think that is the answer. And there is, of course, a pollution of different publications. It's a vicious cycle because of evaluation based on where is what published. So tough question, Kostas, tough question.
And then I have one more question. Like, why someone to publish to the Athena book? I mean, it's a new journal, it's a new activity. I don't have a lot of peers of me to publish over there. How, for example, exams like new journals, they can attract, potential authors?
The reason is that they trust the project. that trust in the vision of the project, and they are not forced by the need for high impact factor and so on. And I think that the main reason to publish in Athena Journal is that we build a profile of our Athena University, and we can display it to those who are interested in, whose trust we would like to gain. And I think that the Athena Research Book can be also a very good instrument in the hand of our rectors.
Excellent. And I was going to add, listening you, that probably a good advertisement would be a good panel of high quality reviewers, because this at the beginning will reflect some quality, no?
It is, but the reviewers are one of the biggest problem in whole research community now. Because there is such a request for reviewers, and I know it from the agency also, where we had the very rigorous methods to choose the reviewers, and then when you have the person and have his or her confirmation, then the human factors come to the stage, and there are so many obstacles that they cannot serve when you want to have them, for example.
Thank you.
Thank
you, Joseph. I don't have any other question myself. I don't know. I think that, I cover everyone. So I would like to, I don't know, are there any questions from the audience? I'm sorry. I mean, if this is the case, I think that they are fully covered. I would like to thank you, Joseph, for this contribution. I'm going to upload in our YouTube channel, and I will share the link of this presentation with all the community. I would like to wish to the people that they follow this semester Site and Research Skills Academy a happy summer. We will be in contact, and we are going to plan and design the new version of our initiative through the Athena European University. So thank you, and speak to you soon. Bye.
Thank you, Kostas. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And once again, congratulations to organizing the meeting in Heraklion. It was great.
Okay, now we have questions from the students when the exams will take place. The exams, you will be notified. I will appreciate a lot if you had more questions than to ask me this question. But anyhow, this is a part of my duty to reply. The exams, they will take place in 2 weeks' time from now, in order to give you time also to study. So I will send an email by tomorrow with the exact date and time of the online evaluation of this course. Okay?
Okay, thank you so much.
Bye-bye, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye.